Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. As I say every week, I also like to say how I know my guests because I think it is so important just for first of all, for our own enrichment, but also when we're enriched and we're better people, we can help make others better and the community better. So I think it's so important to connect with people. I'm in this intentional networking class now. And, I always talk about how I'm kind of shy, but yet I can also perform. But like when I walk into a room, I have trouble just like breaking that plane and being like, hi, I'm Janine. But if a friend does it and they introduce me to someone, okay, I won't shut up if they give me the opportunity, which is actually not good networking because you need to learn to listen. You need to learn to listen too. But what I want to say is it's really great when we meet different people. We have no idea. Be open to meeting them, listening to them, learning about them. You can help one another, and you just don't know where it's going to lead, and you can enrich your life. So today's guest, Lisa VanArsdale, I had on last year, and Lisa and I met through, again, this is where, you hop online, and just because it's not right in your backyard doesn't mean you can't connect. This was, I think, if it was during the pandemic or not, I'm not positive. Right before the Lehigh Valley women's comedy group, and I'm going to mess up the name, stand-up comedy group. I got to meet, I think I met Roya first. Roya Hamadani was introduced to me. She was in one of my comedy shows. It led to me meeting this whole group of fantastic women who are funny, smart, and talented. And that's how I met Lisa. We were on Facebook first. I got to meet them at a writer's session. We all got together the one time in Wegmans. I joined them. They still do that. And I got to perform a couple times. And without further ado, that's how I got to meet my guest this week, Lisa VanArsdale. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Janine. It is so good to be back. Thank you for having me.
It is always a pleasure, and I hope you don't mind. I think in one of my previous episodes, I might have referred to you. I'm like, oh, and then my friend Lisa. I think I might have said a little wacky, and I don't. I hope you don't mind.
That is fine. I am wacky. So if the shoe fits, wear it and flaunt
Okay.
it.
Because I don't mind if people call me wacky, because I'm like, yeah, I am wacky. And even if they said weird, I wouldn't really be bad with that because I'd rather that than boring. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I'd rather be wacky than a lot of things. So I'll take it.
Okay, all right. And I say it again, I should be clarified. I say it with love because I think, Lisa, I think you're a very colorful person, but I think you're a very authentic person. And I kind of hate the word authentic because it gets used inauthentically. But
Inauthentically, right? It's a
I
paradox.
think you're just like, I don't think you hold back, which I love about you. And I think that you find humor in so many things in your life. And I think I just love that about you. So that was a compliment when I said
Thank
wacky, by the
you.
way.
Yeah, I don't have the energy to hold back. It requires more to keep things in than it does to keep them from leaking out. So let it
Okay,
out.
that's my aha moment for the day. I know it's only 10:17, but I have to tell you, I've never thought of it that way. That's interesting. It takes more energy to hold back and hold it in. That's interesting.
This might be a good segue, but in the Gospel of Thomas, which did not make it into the Bible for whatever reason, there's a verse about how if you bring forth what is in you, it will save you. But if you don't bring forth what is in you, it will destroy you. And I think those are words to live by. And I'm not a Bible person.
Wow. Wow, that's really interesting. Well, and that's a good segue because Lisa is many things, but today what we're focusing on, Lisa has a show coming up. And she has a podcast that you can listen to as well. And I don't want to, is it Lisa Joins a Cult? Is that correct?
Yes, they are both called Lisa Joins a Cult. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so check out her podcast. If you obviously after today, you're probably going to be intrigued. So check out Lisa Joins a Cult, the podcast. But Lisa's preparing for a show that will be in the Lehigh Valley area, and it's going to be at the Steel Stacks, right?
Yes.
March 22nd.
March 22nd and 23rd. March 22nd, it's at 8 p.m. and March 23rd, it's at 7:30. I think I have that correct.
Okay. Well, I'm going to share in the show notes. So if you're listening, don't get panicky. Look in the show notes. I will have a link to tickets. So just to give you an idea where if you're in that vicinity or if you're close enough that you're like, I'd like to drive to see that. So that's taking place, Steel Stacks. But before those are details I can share later. Let's talk. I want to talk about what this show is about. This took a lot of research. You spent a lot of time on this. So wherever you want to start, I know when we had you on, I keep saying we, like I have a whole team here. I guess it's all the times that I talk to myself, but like, hey, I need some lighting here. Oh wait, that's me. Cue the lighting. When Lisa was on last time, we talked briefly about your work with cults. I want to focus today on that. So tell us a little bit about how long you've been working on this and what it means. Because I'll tell you, I texted a friend who does not listen to my podcast. Shout out, Kristen. You better listen, you bitch. She only listens to true crime, and I'm like, sorry, I'm not doing that. She likes cults though too. And I mentioned
Well,
you were.
she's in luck.
She's like, was Lisa in a cult? I said, well, all I said is, well, she's kind of studied them. And then I put a link to the last time you were on because I thought, listen, but tell us how this came about, the research, wherever you want to start.
Well, I hope Kristen listened, and that was the gateway to her becoming an avid listener to Funny Wine Girl. But so I have a live show coming up. It's called Lisa Joins a Cult. It is comedy. They're not calling it stand-up because, as you know, and I'm sure plenty of your listeners know, with stand-up, you're obligated to like do the whole like set up, punch, get a laugh every few seconds type thing. And that can be very limiting as an art form for storytelling. So it's being labeled as a one-woman show. And it is funny. There are plenty of jokes in it, but there's also shocking material. There's also tender stuff. Like you'll feel all the feels, but you'll also laugh. And it's a show about all of the cults that I've visited. And there's a lot of them. 9 of them, I believe, are included in the script. And yeah, I don't want to keep rambling. If you have like a question to piggyback off of there.
So first, and also to describe the show a little bit more, it is kind of multimedia, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like you'll be showing maybe some photos or some graphics, things like that.
It is, yeah. So it's very PowerPoint heavy. A lot of the humor is actually visual, I would say, and in the timing of when a slide pops up with what I'm saying or whatever. There's some video, not a lot of video, but the videos that are in there are hilarious. They are fire. People aren't going to want me to come back on stage when these videos play. They're going to be too intriguing. And in addition to the slides and the video, the doors are opening an hour ahead of time. There's going to be tables all around the room in the back with all of my culty souvenirs. So like gifts that they've given me, pamphlets for days, like brochures and stuff. A couple pieces of clothing that I wore when I was with them, if they had like a dress code or whatever, books, tchotchke type things. So it'll be a very like, please touch, please pick up and page through this book. Please read these pamphlets and giggle with your friends for an hour prior to the show.
I love that because that really sucks people in and gets they're connected with it. It's on an interactive level. Like, okay, check this out. I love that idea. That's awesome. Let me ask you, how do you define cult? What a cult is?
So that is something that I speak at length on in the show. So I don't want to give too much away, but
okay.
Essentially, it's one of those words that is difficult to define. The word I've been comparing it to lately in my head is the word idiot. Nobody has a neutral idea of what an idiot is. An idiot is, to be an idiot is not good. It's bad. It's an inherently pejorative word. It's derogatory almost. And cult is the same way. So like the same way nobody thinks they're an idiot or that they're behaving like an idiot or it would be a good idea to be an idiot, nobody thinks they're in a cult or that it would be a good idea to join one. Like everybody thinks cults are bad. Nobody thinks they're in one. Nobody thinks they're joining one. And so because it's so inherently pejorative, that makes it difficult to define. So what I say is the best you can do is to look at cultiness as like a spectrum. because every group's going to have a little bit of cultiness to it. That is human nature. Some are going to be really extreme. Some are going to be pretty benign. And the best you can do is look at characteristics that culty groups have and check boxes, like how culty are we? And through the show, I list off several characteristics of cults, and then I give examples of groups that I've spent time with that are the most exemplary of a particular characteristic.
And so, how long did you spend visiting cults? And what prompted you to do it? Like, was it meant to be something just fun for you? Or did you know going in that you wanted this to lead to like something bigger?
So, unlike most people, I I never do anything with the hope of it turning into like content or material or anything. I do what I want to do because I want to do it and I want to have the experience and then sit around when I'm an old lady remembering that I did it. Uh, which apparently makes me in the minority. A lot of, writers and artists or whatever, like, I got to get out and live more so that I have material. I'm like, or you could just get out and live because it's living, like you'll find things to write about one way or the other, or to tell jokes about, or, to draw about, whatever. But so my earliest visit to a culty group that I can think of, I was 23. For perspective, I'll be 35 this month. And I was in Jamaica and I spent some time with Rastas. Like I actively sought that out. So I've been doing it for a long time. And there's probably something before that that I'm not remembering. But that's what I think of as like my earliest really substantial, like, I'm going to go talk to people who believe something different than I do and seek to understand situation. And I guess I was just doing it because I'm a relentlessly curious person. I'm an adventurous person. In that particular instance, I was in Jamaica and just aggressively doing all the Jamaica things that I hadn't done yet. Um, and I was raised pretty Christian, and that ended up not working out for me. And so I think as I continue to do it, it's just like an an like an ongoing unpacking of that experience and the experience of being raised in it and then leaving it, and kind of comparing and contrasting, like, I was brought up to believe this and this is why it didn't work for me. This is what these people believe, and here's how they're similar, here's how they're different, here's what I like and here's what I don't. So it's all just like an ongoing adventure in critical thinking, but also in compassion and connection. That sounded really flowery.
No, but it's great. And I know that when we spoke last time, you brought up the idea that you're a curious person, which I love because, research shows just, I'll get clinical here or whatever, scientific, but that it's so valuable, like for our lives to enrich us. Because I
Yes.
think when we're curious, we are bound to learn more because we're like, what's that? And you seek it out and then you learn whether you like it or not. That's totally different, but you learn something when you're curious.
Right.
And I love
I
that.
think that curiosity and joy are very closely related.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, and what a way like to have that perspective and go through life. And I mean, again, I see that in your posts. So I see the joy and I think that will shine through in the show.
Thank
So
you.
so you didn't set out, obviously, like you said, which I love that you said that too. You set out just to learn and then you had gathered all of this. So at what point did you, excuse me, say, I think I want to share this in a show, or I think I've done so much of this that I've learned a lot and I just want to share this.
Well, it definitely became something that I wanted to just like talk about all the time. Like, I will hyperfixate and be like, if you don't want to talk about cults or Bruce Springsteen tributes, I don't have anything to say to you. Like, I go through periods, uh, where I'm like, no, but really, this is it. This is all I have. Um, and so essentially what happened was, like, I always thought, like, maybe I'll eventually write about some of these groups on my blog when the time is right or something, because it did reach a point where I was like, this stuff is so interesting that it's worth sharing. Um, but then, so what happened was almost 3 years ago, I was talking with Ryan Hill, who is like the head honcho of comedy at Steel Stacks. And I didn't know him very well. And I didn't think he liked me. But he said, Lisa, the things that you've done with your life are just so remarkable, or something along those lines. And then he said, if you ever want to do a one woman show, I would produce it for you in a heartbeat. And I was like, what? Because that is something that I would never initiate doing on my, like, I would never have the audacity. And so if I sat on that idea for a few months, and eventually, because it was kind of COVID-y at the time. So when people were finally vaccinated and everything, I went in and had a meeting with some people, and we threw out ideas for what I could do a one woman show about. And cults was not on that list, but it inevitably turned into a conversation where I was like, so guys, I went to visit the Moonies last summer and this happened and blah, 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 blah. And they were like, oh, you have Mormon underwear too. Were you raised Mormon? No, I just love religious communities. And then we were like, oh, that's what the show should be about. And then Ryan was like, you should visit more groups. And I was like, I will take that permission and run with it. You just like legitimized my hobby here. And the world was opening back up and everything. So it was just really good timing. It was really good timing.
And I love that when things come together. Like you started it because you were curious, and then this opportunity came up, and then it was like, and it's interesting. I'm in this intentional networking class, and a lot of it is about collaboration and doing for others, generosity.
Mm.
And then yes, you do hope. I mean, we can lie and say we don't want something back, but ultimately that's life. The currency of doing for one another. Like, I do something, oh hey, I have a contact that can help you. Oh, you can help me, great, and it's back and forth. So
Yeah.
that opportunity, was like them going, wait, Lisa, this is what it should be about. I think that's awesome. So then you had, an opportunity to keep going, as you said, as the world opened up after COVID.
Yes.
Are you still at this point? Are you obviously you have more than enough like content and learning and to
More
put
than
into the
any
show?
one person could ever use. Yeah, it's out of control.
It's out of control. Do you keep like? Do you have like a whole room full of your tchotchkes, so to speak?
My bedroom is kind of that room by default, because I actually sat down the other day and like kind of made a master list of what comes to Steel Stacks with me. Like I've had all the pamphlets organized into folders for months. But I was like, okay, what books need to come off my shelf? What clothes need to come out of my closet? What My walls are going to be kind of bare for that weekend, because a lot of what's on display in my room is stuff that I've collected from all over the world, and a lot of them are religious relic-y type things. So the
How
crucifix collection is going to have to come down for the weekend, you
Oh
know?
my gosh. Wow. That alone is enough reason to go to see a crucifix collection. I mean, come on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I was going to say, when you said all over the world, I want people to understand how vast this is. Like, so how far have you traveled? I know you mentioned Jamaica. Have you gone
Mhm.
to other countries where you've studied cults as well?
I wouldn't say that I've necessarily studied cults in other countries, but I have traveled a lot. And I don't know, I was just kind of brought up to, like, when you go to a country, you visit all of their, big architectural wonders like museums and monuments and things. And that includes, cathedrals and houses of worship and stuff. So when I was in India, it went without saying, you're going to visit all the Hindu temples, you're going to go to the Taj Mahal, you're going to go to the Lotus Temple. So there's been a lot of stuff like that. But I've never, since like agreeing to do this, been like off to, whatever country specifically for that. But it is something that I keep in mind while I travel, since I haven't done a lot of international travel since agreeing to do this, because A, money, B, COVID, C, life. But I was in Morocco last fall, two autumns ago. I don't know how you say that. And we went to the second largest mosque in the world. You
Wow.
know, like that's a given. Or I was in Ecuador this time last year, and I was there for Ash Wednesday. So I went and had my first ever Ash experience at a cathedral that was built in the 1500s. You just it's kind of like fallen into place nicely with other things that I'm doing in life. So it all feels kind of meant to be.
Yeah. And you talked about, traveling in architecture. And I mean, I know when I went to France, that was a big part of it. The friends I've
Big,
made,
yeah.
they used to be Catholic. They actually now, I forget if I always confuse atheist and agnostic, but their lives, the things they've experienced, they no longer believe,
Mm,
but they still love the architecture. So when I
yes.
visited with them, they were taking me all over to enjoy the beauty of the buildings and everything. But would you say a key part or a big part of what you've learned and what maybe we'll see in the show is
Mm,
not just the customs and like the garb or the buildings, but the people, because you spent some like serious time getting to know the people. So the human side of it, like them, the people themselves.
yeah, absolutely. And being raised in a Christian tradition, it's the whole like be like Jesus thing, which I think generally is worth aiming for, whether you believe in God or not. Like Jesus was a cool guy, from what I understand. We could all aim to be like him. And Jesus, from what we are told about him, was born in a manger because nobody could make space for him. And people who join these groups are often people who nobody could make space for. Um, and that kind of ties into like what the Bible says about like what you do for the least of these, you're doing for me. And like Jesus hung out with prostitutes and lepers and tax collectors who were like, the worst of the worst back then. And they were the least of these, as the Bible says. And I think the least of these today, you could argue, are people who, for whatever reason, have joined these groups that everyone looks at and you're like, these people are crazy. So why not go hang out with them? I think it's the Christ-like thing to do, whether you're into Jesus or religious or whatever or not.
Yeah.
I think it's a thing worth doing. Our world is becoming more and more divided, especially with politics, as both sides just have like completely different morals and values, and it really is hard for me to like be able to like agree or relate in any way to people who vote differently than I do, because it's just like a completely different set of priorities and moral code. So I think it's a really valuable thing to seek to understand in any way that you can, and that's what I'm doing when I visit these groups.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to give away anything too big from the show, but if there's one thing that you could share that
Mm.
made an impact on your life, or that you really were like, oh wow, that some kind of like aha moment or something that you really learned that you thought was great, or anything that impacted you, like if you want to just share one of those times or moments.
Yeah. Let me think. What would be a good one? There have been so many like profound moments. Um, like a lot. There was, I'm trying to decide here. So I thought that I had all of the groups that I was going to talk about gathered. And like, I thought I had figured out, like, okay, I'm going to talk about these groups and these are the stories I'm going to tell. And this is going to be the box that they're checking. I don't know if the script was like written, but it was like at the very least very thoroughly outlined. And then last January, I went to a polygamist convention in Texas
Mm.
for Christian polygamists, not Mormon. Um, and I disagreed about just about everything with these people. It's an experience I still think about all the time. I'm kind of bummed I couldn't be there this year. Um, And something that they did on the last day was they did communion. And for anyone who doesn't know what communion is, it's the thing in the Bible where Jesus says, eat this bread in remembrance of me, drink this wine in remembrance of me. And communion looks different in different churches and denominations and religions. And I've seen it play out different ways. Um, but that was the most profound because these people, because of their beliefs about polygamy, they've been divorced, they've been, disowned by adult children, they've been alienated, their churches have asked them to step down from positions. So this weekend is like their church family, essentially. And they only see each other a couple times a year. So they do churchy things like communion. Um, and communion for them, we were in a hotel conference room and it was passed around on like a plastic cafeteria tray. And the crackers were in like a disposable paper bowl, and the grape juice was in these colorful printed Dixie cups. And I like cheered up watching it happen because while communion doesn't mean anything to me, I think it is beautiful to like partake of what is sacred for other people if they invite you to do so. And it was just this like really shining example of like, we don't need a fancy church building. We don't need like a nice chalice to drink out of. We don't even need the little plastic cups that you order for your church. We're doing this with what we have, and what we have is colorful, cute as fuck Dixie cups, and we're making it work. And it was just this like moment of like faith is what you make of it. And that's a story. I tell it in the show, whoops. But it really like had an effect on me.
Yeah. Well, you said one thing I want to follow up with. You said, when people invite you. So I guess one question I'm thinking, like, sometimes these folks might be, are they a little bit guarded? Like, because you're experiencing what they do and you're learning and you're not there to poke fun but you're there to learn. But how was it to get what was there any barriers to were, as far as them being open and like, hey, yeah, you can join us, you can see what we're doing. Was that easy? Were most people like, sure, you can join us? I don't know. I would expect some to be a little bit more guarded, I guess.
If they're guarded, they're not showing it. Um, and I think they might be guarded because something to be aware of about culty groups is, they usually are doing some sort of weird, shady shit. But they don't want you to know about the shady shit that they do until it's too late for you to leave. So until you've taken the vow and been baptized in, or, become a member or sold all your possessions or given them your life savings, that's when they're going to start showing you the weird shit that they do. Um, so they're almost always doing something.
Okay. Okay.